Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Anson and Paul's Big Movie Podcast. I'm Anson Chan.
I'm Paul Morgan.
And today we are reviewing The Skin I Live In.
And The Fall.
Yeah. So, Paul, what would you like to start with first?
Do you want to tell us all about The Fall?
I would love to.
Hell yeah.
Let's go. Let's see what this is all about. The Fall. Shot in 2006. A Sony classic. Directed by Tarsim Singh. Written by some other people. And starring basically nobody. Is this excellent story about stories. Taking place in around the 1920s or so. During the early days of movies and film. Is our protagonist, Roy, and the main character, Alexandria, in a hospital. The two become friends. Alexandria, this little girl, continuing to visit Roy to hear his story that he's weaving for her. But little does she know that this story is merely a ruse to get her to steal medicine for him, as he's very depressed because the love of his life seems to have walked out on him or something. He's just in a very bad place, let's put it that way. Yeah. And also, he's pretty hurt physically from his working on the set. So, is that good enough?
Yeah. No, I think that's a pretty reasonable. I think just maybe put in there that like the most of the movie is caught in between the real life of him and Alexandria and the like very vivid reimaginations of the stories he's telling her.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good addition. Yeah, I think that's good then.
Yeah.
So, Paul, what did you think of The Fall?
Start with positives. Just about everything production-wise in this movie I thought was really fantastic. The cinematography was really gorgeous. The coloration was awesome, and it made a lot of the scenes pop super big time. Everything just looked so freaking cool. That girl, the little girl Alexandria, is like one of the cutest fucking kids I've ever seen in my life, and I am on record as hating children.
Yep.
I thought Lupe's did a great job. He's probably the only well-known actor in this movie.
What else has he done?
He was in like Guardians of the Galaxy and a bunch of other stuff like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. What other shit? Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day, The White Countless, The Good Shepherd, Twilight, some other shit. He was in The Hobbit as well, which, I mean, I didn't see any of the Hobbit ones, but whatever. He was in.
I did not recognize him, but he's in quite a few of these. You're right.
Yeah, he's in a lot of stuff. I thought the soundtrack was great. It was mostly stuff that I recognize but wouldn't know the name of, I guess, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought the kind of the whole concept, it blends a lot of like story concepts that I think are cool, like the whole like Scheherazade, 1,000 Arabian Nights thing of like come back and I'll tell you another story is really compelling because it forces creativity, and you can kind of be open-ended with your stories and they don't have to always make sense. But then also like the angle of the I want to kill myself because my lovers left me because of my condition type thing is very old school Shakespearean almost. I don't know. I thought most of this movie worked for me pretty well. I have one thing I'll critique a little bit that I we'll mention later, but other than that, most of this movie I thought was pretty wonderful for the most part.
Yeah, I agree.
What worked for you in this movie?
I'll echo a lot of what you just said. The visuals are just so beautiful. Every single shot, and location in this movie is just so amazing. I mean, the
Yeah.
locations. Holy fuck! Let's talk about that for a second.
The locations are insane. If you look at like the Wikipedia page,
yeah,
the filming locations, it's like they went all over the fucking world and just got some of the coolest looking shit of all time.
I know that they shot a lot in India. Do you have a list up in front of you of like where else?
Yeah, so I have a list in front of me in the Wikipedia page. So they have the first Statue of Liberty in Paris, the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. They have Hadrian's Villa in Tivoli, Italy, Capitolione Hill Colosseum in Rome, Italy, Buenos Aires, Argentina, the Taj Mahal in India, the Palace Lobby in Jodhpur, Rajasthan itself, Indonesia, India, more Indonesia, Fiji, the Czech Republic, Jaipur, South Africa, Namibia. They went all over the world for this fucking thing, man.
Jesus.
And that's just the things that I felt confident pronouncing. So think about if you know, that's all the stuff I felt confident trying to say out loud on a public record. But I mean, there's a lot more stuff than that.
Wow. That's something, man.
Yeah.
The locations are just fucking breathtaking in this movie. And
yeah, every shot is just like
yeah. If there's movie as a spectacle, not in like a big transformy way, but just like to sit back and let your breath get kind of taken away by the beauty of the world. And in this case, all of this is like real. From what I understand, it's just truly, truly amazing. I thought it was really clever the way they interacted with their filming locations too in their like flashbacks.
Yeah.
When they're filming it, I think in the very end, I'm guessing that's by the Taj Mahal. It looks like that what I'd imagine the Alhambra looking like. It's like a castle built into a cliff. Let me see if they shot there.
Yeah.
Alhambra. And I only know this because I play way too many video games. And that is a civilization wonder you build.
Oh, no way. That's funny.
Yeah, it might be it. I don't know. Maybe I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But when you watch this like multiple times, like, because this is a movie I love and I've loved for quite a while, but I've not seen in such a long time, seeing the way that they use their locations to shoot with was very clever because there's not a lot of like big panoramic shots. It's just smart with its angles, like being low to the ground or close to a wall to give a feeling of like sneaking or grandeur, you know, and just kind of playing with the colors of the costumes and the movements of the characters in order to make these places come alive and not feel static.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's just so interesting to look at, and you kind of you get lost in its beauty, and or rather that beauty also adds to the wonder of the narrative that it's telling.
Yeah, and I think worth mentioning is the fact that like a lot of the visuals seem like they could have come out of art house films, but because the plot is so like straightforward, or at least like the plot of the story that he's telling her is so straightforward, it makes it okay. It makes it less jarring how like neat and clean a lot of the visuals are, if that makes sense.
I kind of see what you're saying. Yeah. How about you tell us a little bit more about what you're talking about, though?
I guess I'm referring to a few specific instances, like points in the story where you get like a Wes Anderson-y looking like wide shot or something like that, and everything's moving very uniformly, and all of these same colors are converging and going interweaving with each other. One of those scenes is in the beginning with the Alexander the Great, where the guy's approaching on horse with the helmet full of water.
Right.
Where it's like it's jarring how like perfect the like coloration versus like the framing of the movement is on that. But the
Mm,
fact that you know that, like, you can hear what's going on, it makes it less jarring because the guy's explaining it as it's happening. It's the same thing as when, like, there's all those dudes in, like, the black outfits on the, like, crazy interwinding stairs near the end. I think it's
yeah.
like, you know what I'm talking about? Like,
Hmm.
2/3 of the way through the movie. And
I now I
like
understand what
all
you mean.
these visuals that you would usually, if you saw it in like any of those Jodorowsky movies, it would be like fucking weird and freaky, and you'd be wondering about it. But in this, it's like so straightforward what's actually happening. It's those weird visuals are not super jarring or like confusing, I guess. I don't know.
I understand. So like you kind of mentally accept their location
Yeah.
regardless of the context of the story just because it's
Yes.
presented in
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
very simple narration. I agree. I think that adds to the wonder. And I now understand what you're saying too, where its shooting is like you said, Wes Anderson esque. I got a lot of that vibe when watching this movie.
Yeah.
And with the colors and like the grand landscapes, very Jongy Moe with the
Yep.
really defined character colors and
Super
the
saturated
scenes.
character colors. Yeah.
Yeah, the making of this movie is really interesting. I've been watching a little bit of the behind the scenes stuff on
Oh,
YouTube.
interesting.
I remember having this DVD as a kid. I think this was like one of my first like favorite movies as a kid growing up. I was just like in complete and utter awe of this movie,
Yeah.
and I had it on a lot, just like in the background of me playing games growing up. Like if I'm playing
Yeah.
like on my laptop, I'd have that on, and it was just such a pretty movie to listen to and kind of turn up from your computer from time to time. It was special then, it is special now. And I remember at the time watching like the behind the scenes stuff on the DVD, and a lot of it didn't make a lot of sense because it doesn't weave a complete story of its production process, which at the time I thought was interesting, but now I'm just like totally mesmerized by, how
Yeah.
did they do this? Where did they go? Who was his director? And how did it come to him like this? Like what a
Seriously.
really interesting interpretation of whatever script they had or
Yeah.
something.
Especially because he didn't really do anything since then. Like nothing super
Yeah,
impactful, I guess. I
yeah,
mean, Emerald City is supposedly pretty cool, but I've never seen it and I don't know anything about it. But like all the rest of his movies, like I've looked them up and they have not gotten great reviews. They have
yeah,
not done well in the box office. I don't
yeah.
know what is happening, but like obviously this guy has amazing vision.
Yeah, it's another really sad thing that A, I didn't know that the director was Indian, but B, that there's just been nothing for him in the way of like Hollywood accolades afterwards.
Yeah.
And this was such a great movie that I think did really poorly.
Yeah, it
I'm
didn't
trying to
do
look at the
super well
box
in the box
office.
office.
Yeah, the what is this? Become an IMDb Pro? What is this? All this horseshit?
Oh, it's
Uh,
just an ad. You can get like extra features like finding out what like status productions are in their production, stuff like that.
I guess that's what they want for the box office now. I remember when that was a free feature,
Yeah.
like literally the last time we shot. You
Yeah.
wouldn't happen to have the budget on you, would you?
For this movie,
Yeah.
budget was, oh no. Let me look at Box Office Mojo because sometimes they have extra info.
Sure.
It says here not applicable on
Oh
budget. So
God.
I want to say this had to have been a huge production though.
It had to have been. I mean, they shot in so many locations.
Cuz like the movie after this and the movie he did before this both had budgets over like $30 million.
Okay,
So like the
that makes
movie he
sense.
did before The Fall had a budget of $34 million. The movie he did immediately after The Fall had a budget of 85 million. So I'm thinking somewhere in the middle there, like 50-ish million.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this movie did not make any money or a lot of money. They gave it an R rating, which was something that he talked about in some of his interviews on YouTube.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't know why they gave this an R rating. I think it really destroyed the movie because no one saw it. And I
Yeah, that
thought
does
about that
tend to
later.
cripple movies. Not so much anymore since sales have gone down, but like in the era where you needed a good theater run to do well, that crippled a lot of movies.
Yeah, I think no one saw this movie because it was too art house of an R, and then there's no reason for it to be an R. You know,
Yeah.
you really got to go out of your way for this movie.
Yeah, there's not a lot of like blood or gore, there's no sex, there's a little bit of
Yeah,
violence, but it's like it's
yeah, it's like
cartoony
it's
violence.
fanciful.
Yeah, it's like a kids movie violence.
Yeah, I honestly don't understand why it got an R. Aside from the ending where it gets like really depressing, or unless like the subtext of drug abuse a little bit. Like that's
Yeah,
it though.
that could be it.
But even as a kid, you don't understand what the hell's happening. My first time watching this as a kid, just not even thinking about what was happening, like morphin 3. You know, I didn't know what morphine was at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
I was a kid, and then like I didn't know
Well,
what
it
that
says
meant.
on the MPAA's website it's rated R for violent images. I don't even
There's
know
like
what the
none
heck
of
that
that.
means. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know what that means.
there was no dismemberment. There was no
Yeah, I can
disembowelment.
think of PG-13 movies that are way worse than this.
Oh hell yeah!
Yeah.
So if I had to guess, if I put my conspiracy hat on, I think there's a bit of studio meddling that went on here to kill this guy's career.
I mean
Just as a
that
theory.
sure. I'll run with it.
Yeah. Tarsim Singh seemed pretty bitter in his interviews, but he also seemed like a really, really strong headed type of guy. In the shots they were showing in the behind the scenes stuff, he
Yeah.
looks like a really aggro director, you know? And I
Yep.
could see him just being that type where like the studios would just want an excuse to kill him. Not
I mean
kill,
that
but you know what
makes
I mean, kill his
sense. Yeah,
career.
yeah.
Yeah, and so they was like, well, you're fucked.
Cuz strong-headed directors traditionally need yes men to be their best selves.
Or they just need banks. They just don't need studios. They
Yeah.
need
Yeah,
banks.
exactly. They need
Yeah.
just piles of money and to be left alone.
Yep. Woody Allen has been speaking about this a lot recently, or at least I've been seeing a lot of interviews of Woody Allen speaking on the subject, where he's
Well,
saying,
to use a less controversial example, Paul Thomas Anderson is, like he famously like does not let producers mess with his movies at all, and he's made some of the bestest movies of all time
mm-hmm.
or I mean some of the most interesting movies of our generation at the very least.
I think most of the directors who I've followed acutely have all mentioned this kind of stuff. Orson Welles famously had a huge falling out with all his studios or whoever he worked with, where they just
Yeah.
botched his works to pieces, and he just stopped directing and was just acting in most of them because he's like, "Fuck this."
Yep.
So I can totally see that story applicable to Tarsing Singh, although I'm sure we'll never ever hear a story about that because he's never going to be famous for telling that story or to be able
Yeah.
to tell that story famous enough. But kind of back to what we were talking about, I guess. A little bit of sidetrack. The costuming in this fucking movie is so good. Characters are so memorable. My favorite character is the silent Indian in this movie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's just like got that. He's such a weird looking duck. You know, he's got like that
Yeah, he looks
odd
cool though.
hat. Yeah, square cut beard and his like gold shield, and he's just like this dude straight out of like
The bright green outfit too.
yeah some fairy tale character.
Oh yeah.
And he's so memorable, although he has no lines.
Yeah. He has that little smirk that he gives all the time. Like when they're showing the close up of him in his opening scene, right before they tell the story about his wife and shit. And he has that little smirk on his face. I love that.
I don't recall the smirk. I guess remember I'm too taken away with his just costume design, I guess, and
Yeah.
his scraggliness. I'll have to. I'll probably watch that again. I definitely will watch this movie again now that I
Yeah.
know I have it. The little girl I thought was phenomenal. She's totally 100% believable. Her accent I think is very cute.
Oh yeah, it made her like a billion times more adorable. You're like, oh, this little girl like can barely even speak English, and she's trying to understand all this really deep shit.
Yeah, and it was so fun watching her experience kind of like these really traumatic events around her, and the very subtle way it shows her reacting to it, like when she sees Do you remember this in the movie when she's like walking around the hospital and then she sees like someone dead and then like it looks like the mother of like a child is like crying at the bed like you gotta wake up, you gotta wake up, they're gonna chop you up if you don't wake up, you know.
Yeah.
And then like you just hear Alexandria's like little box kind of like hit the wall or something, and she looks up and gives like a snarl, and then it cuts to her just like standing on the stairs like looking really sad, and the old guy's like comforting her like it's okay if you wet yourself, just put it in the dryer and hide it
Yeah.
until it's dry. And as a kid, so much of this was lost on me, so much creative visual storytelling that I was just totally unaware of at the time. Even the old guy being the shaman or the mystic in this movie,
Yeah.
that didn't make sense to me until like later, because like his teeth fall out and all this other stuff. But there's a whole bunch of other hints that I didn't get in my first watch, of like the googly 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 go away or whatever, the googly googly be gone,
Googly, 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 be gone.
the spell that he teaches her, and then that's the kind of the thing that he says as the mystic later on. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense, because the story kind of changes around Alexandria's experiences. People kind of like take places of the other actors. I thought it was just such a fun way of exploring the medium of storytelling. Anyway, I'm getting rambly. I like the fairy tale. I like Roy's journey dealing with all his other shit, and
Yeah. I also love that the dude next to him receiving the like placebo drug.
Yeah,
I didn't notice that. I saw this as a youngster too. Our mutual friend Joey told me about this, and I watched it with my family actually when I was a lot younger, and I really didn't get a lot of it. I just thought it was really gorgeous, and so I got that this time, and I was like, oh, that's hilarious. That's why he, I don't know.
I didn't understand the placebo thing either as a kid. When like he wakes up, when she thinks that Roy is dead, for some reason, I knew overdosing with sleeping pills, but it was just like it kept flipping back and forth between the story and real life. I guess I hadn't quite put that together as a kid. Yeah. And then like seeing him like waking up and his just complete rage, I was like, what the hell? There's this disconnect for me, at least in my memory. But then watching that now, when he's like, it's just sugar! They're feeding you sugar! And he's just flipping out. It just made so much more sense to me.
Yeah.
The movie's taken on a much more interesting look and feel, knowing Roy's side more than just Alexandria. But that's very unique, being able to experience the movie as the dumb kid I was, like Alexandria,
and still being able to appreciate it.
Yeah, so that's just mastery on many levels, in my opinion. Yeah. So, really, again, kudos to Tar Singh in this movie. Not that he's ever going to hear this, but really fucking great movie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What didn't work for you in this movie?
Okay, this is the only thing, but it's a big thing, but it's not the whole movie's worth. It's just certain bits of it. The editing. The editing was, it could have been more seamless. There are a lot of scenes where instead of very carefully crafting a narrative position within the scope of the film, they opt to cut in a way that doesn't seem to have a lot of meaning between like handheld shots and quicker cuts. In some places that works, like when they're telling the story of the squaw who gets lost in the maze.
Yeah.
In that scene, that works because you want to see her running through all these places that seemingly have no connection but are definitely connected. In like the slavery scene when they're doing the intro to the black guy, it's like this gorgeous setup shot of like all these dudes doing this work, and it's very evenly, set up so that all of the dudes are walking by at the same time, and it's a very slow moving kind of steady shot. And then all of a sudden it's all these like really quick cuts between handheld shots of these dudes working in the fields, and it's like, dude, if you would have just had the self-control to block out the movements of the rest of this scene the way that you did the first part of the scene, where it seemed very, I don't know, there were certain parts of the movie where the editing just did not work for me. It seemed like it was a little bit choppy, a little bit too fast, and it didn't take its time enough, even though it totally could have and still serve the story. That
I can see that.
Is the only issue I have with this movie that I can think of at the moment. What about you? What would you say?
That wasn't noticeable enough for it to be a huge issue for me, but I will agree with you that there are, like that scene that you mentioned, the slave scene when they're freeing them, the cuts between that sequence is a little off. Like when he's setting fire to the plantation and everything.
Yeah.
I completely understand. The only thing that really didn't work for me in this movie is the acting. I hated the vast majority of the acting in this movie.
Interesting.
I hated Roy's acting. I didn't think he was very good.
Okay.
I think he's very passable, but he wasn't very good. He's just like, what? Huh? He loses his accent eventually.
Sure. I didn't notice that, but I'm also not the most astute observer of acting, as we'll find out when the next movie comes up.
Uh-oh. Yeah, hearing him talk and being the narrator is nice. It's not the best, but it's nice. He has a good tone for voice acting and that type of work. It works very well, but he has the same sounding reaction so many times of just, huh? What?
Yeah.
Almost comically. But that's not, I don't think that's what they were going for, trying to make him like a cartoon character. But I think that was just genuinely bad acting. So it didn't feel stylistic versus all the backdrop of everything else that's happening. You know what I mean? Nurse Evelyn, I thought her acting was pretty bad. That's also the love interest, I think, in the story when they're flashing back to it.
Sure.
I think her acting kind of sucks. I think like she's gorgeous for her part. I like the sound of her voice. I think this is what happened. I think Tar Singh went for people for the sound and the look, but
Oh, yeah.
misunderstanding acting, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you've watched the making of the thing. Is this guy actually from the United States or is he from India? Because he's
think he's from
directing
India.
English actors.
Yeah, he speaks with a heavy accent, not like a super duper heavy accent.
Yeah, so maybe he might not have a great grasp of like the inflections and stuff that we use in the United States.
That would be my understanding. That would be my guess. That he's born in India. Yeah, he's totally Indian.
Okay.
So
yeah, jeez.
That makes a lot of sense as to why he would cast for look more than actual. Because goddamn,
certainly,
visually it's structured near flawlessly versus what they're actually saying or how they're actually interacting. But
yep.
That's about it for the things that didn't work for me. I guess it's time for recommendations. Before we do that, was there anything that you wanted to talk about again briefly before we move on to recommendations?
Not particularly. I just think this is a pretty solid flick, man. Just really interesting, well-made stuff. Lots of potential for inspiration to be drawn from it, especially visual inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a lot more else to discuss about it. What about you?
I think the last thing I just wanted to point out was the music and the mood this movie sets is just so outstanding.
Yeah.
This is one of the few movies that I know of that can consistently make me like tear up at the very end.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. And it consistently delivers that too. Because the ending sequence is just so powerful. There are two really excellent points in this movie. I'd say like the last half hour and the first 10 minutes are outstanding. I love the slow motion beginning while the Beethoven's Seventh is playing, the Allegretto or whatever.
Yeah.
And then by the end, that's playing a big part into swelling the whole the ending of Roy's story, as it were.
Yeah.
And it's just so sad hearing Alexandria is just fucking outstanding emotional reaction to the horror that she's kind of imagining for these characters taking place. And that always makes me really sad when spoiler, when like the slave gets shot trying to save Alexandria, and like he's getting shot up all hero style with the arrow sticking out of his back, and then he falls down, and then he's looking back on top of the bed of arrows, and his like last words are to Alexandria saying, "It's okay." Yeah, so comforting and so sweet, and then all the arrows fly in. It's so sad, and that makes me so sad. It makes me tear up. And then the chase builds up toward the Indians climbing up, trying to save Alexandria too, and then he gets caught. And he has to look up, and the Western music is playing, the cowboy music is playing. And he does his like little salute and kills himself. No! Like Alexandria screamed, just fucking from the pit of a child's broken heart comes that scream. Just makes me tear up like every time. Like oh, that's so sad, Yep. And it's not done in a mushy way either. It's just done in a very high drama way, which is so fucking rare. Love that. That's the last thing I'd say. Those two things, the marriage of music and the consistently emotionally impactful ending for me is definitely a standout that is worth mentioning for me.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, would you recommend The Fall?
I would definitely recommend it. I actually hadn't thought of it since I saw it until you recommended it. And I immediately was flooded with all these really gorgeous images, and I was glad that I watched it again. So, what about you? Would you recommend this?
Yep, I certainly would. Although to those who don't like quote-unquote art house shit, you probably won't like this movie. I'm guessing pretty highly you won't like this movie. I don't know. I feel like this is a good enough movie on its own that you could like it.
Yeah.
It depends on if you like high adventure or not, I guess. It's not swashbuckling like Pirates of the Caribbean.
It's like swashbuckling made artsy.
Yeah, it takes its time a lot more.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would actually give this a pretty blanket recommendation, honestly. They could tell me if they don't like it. Those people. I was like, all right.
Yeah.
Well, now I know, because this is like it floats for me in between. Because it can live in both worlds of being like a good whole movie versus a very, very good art house movie. It doesn't rely solely on its art houseness to be good.
Yeah.
But I think that is definitely its greatest strength.
Certainly.
Yeah. Well, as we move swiftly along to the sound of Beethoven's Seventh, or whatever, I don't know what music I'll add for this. Let's go to Antonio Banderas in The Skin I Live In.
La piel que habito. All right. La piel que habito, or The Skin I Live In English, is a 2011 psychological horror film written and directed by Pedro Almodovar. He is a famous director from Spain. This movie is about a surgeon whose messed up marriage results in a couple of related suicides, which then throw him into a vengeful vendetta against a person who he believes to have caused one of the suicides. That, I think, is the skin and bones of the movie. On a philosophical level, it's much more rich than in its plot. It's about... Let me grab some of my notes just so I can read from this directly. It's about our identity versus how society perceives our identity. It's about betrayal. It's about thoughts that you have inside of you versus the appearance that you have on your exterior. That kind of am I my body, or am I my thoughts, or am I the observer of my thoughts type thing. And it is described as by the director himself as a horror story without screams or frights. I think that's a pretty good vague synopsis of this one. What do you think?
I think that's pretty fair. You hit all the plot points and
Yeah, I hit all the
rounded it out
main
with the
points that
philosophy.
need really to be hit.
Yeah. It does need the philosophy of the story to round out a lot of its edges.
Yeah, certainly. I don't want to give away too much more of it because I think we'll probably discuss a little bit of it as we go on. But starting with what we liked or what worked for us, do you want to give us your take on this flick?
Sure. I enjoyed the performance by Antonio Banderas. I thought he was the whole time I was looking at him, I was like, God, he looks a lot like Cary Grant.
Oh
And
yeah, dude, he's a handsome guy, man.
yeah, he has like that 1950s style quality of handsomeness.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever seen him in anything else, honestly. And I was like, oh, that's Antonio Banderas, the name I've heard of before, and never been able to put a face to a name until now. I don't think
Oh, dude, he was my favorite Zorro as a kid.
he was Zorro.
He was in the Mark of Zorro that had Anthony Hopkins in it.
Oh, I never saw that as a kid, actually. Oh my god, or maybe I did.
Oh no, not the Mark of Zorro, the Mask of Zorro. One letter off. The Mask of Zorro was the 1998 movie that he starred in. It was so fucking good. It might be a shitty movie, and I just remember it really well from being a kid. But
This is weird how full circle this selection of movies is taking us back to our childhood.
oh
I
my
was
gosh,
obsessed
yeah,
with
it's
Zorro
funny.
growing up.
What's that?
I was obsessed with Zorro growing up.
Oh, me too, dude. I used to love making a little Z in like the dirt with my sticks and stuff like
Oh
that.
man, yeah. And then
Uh,
watching The Fall, and then she has a little Zorro mask.
yeah, the mask she wears. Oh
Yeah.
man,
Antonio Banderas is secretly influencing The Fall. It's like fucking.
seriously,
Where's my conspiracy yarn, man?
I know.
Yeah.
Anyways, you were saying,
Antonio Banderas was great in this movie.
yeah,
I liked I liked the setup in like the first 30 minutes. The weird Shakespearean house thing he had going on with him like experimenting with he's
the
some sort of
skin.
like yeah, I was like interpreting like a lot of gothic vibes. He's kind of like
Oh
a
yeah.
Dr. Frankenstein sort of guy
Oh,
experimenting on
definitely, yeah.
somebody. A little bit of what's that fucking gothic literature one called? The Mark, I think it is, where this dude's like obsessed about beauty on his wife, who's very beautiful, but she has like a birthmark, and he tries like his whole life to cure it, and then like in doing so, it kills her.
Oh, that's hilarious. Damn.
So I was getting that kind of vibe in the
Oh,
beginning.
definitely, yeah.
I was getting a lot of like Cask of Amontillado kind of stuff going
I got
on.
very Cask of Amontillado vibes from this movie. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like a lot of revenge and locking people up and whatnot.
Oh yeah. Yep.
A little bit of Rebecca feel, because like he's haunted by the look of her face, because as it's revealed later, his like twisted revenge turns into like weird form of like self torture and
Yeah, it's like obsession with his past, kind of.
yeah, and kind of creates what is apparently like his ex-wife before the accident and her killing herself. And
Yeah.
then he stares at her, just kind of haunted. The old maid who was secretly his mother
Yeah, that was a weird storyline.
also recognizes her face as her and saying like this is making you sick in the beginning and all this other stuff. I thought was really
Yeah.
interesting. The gothic vibes and influences I really got a kick out of in the
Oh
beginning.
yeah.
Yeah.
Especially like a lot of like gothic literature, not gothic literature, but like kind of early horror literature has this kind of like wacky doctor vibes to it, like
Yep.
Reanimator and like all the like
Mhm.
old H.P. Lovecraft stuff.
Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of thing.
Yeah, there's this kind of element of like this weird like medicine has this power that we haven't tapped into yet kind of vibe that this takes a lot from, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I also enjoyed the house, I guess they were in.
Oh, the house was gorgeous, dude.
Yeah, it's just like really cool fucking castle, really. It's like weird,
Yeah.
odd, walled, gated villa that could function as like a Shakespeare tragedy thing happening there. Or,
Oh
because
yeah.
it's so beautiful on the inside, kind of highlights this more modern take on, I guess, a gothic fairy tale. I'll get to what didn't work for me very shortly after. But, yeah, I loved his fucking house, man. Oh, what a pad.
Yeah.
I like the humongous paintings on the walls. And, I in the beginning again, I enjoyed he was creating his girl, his like perfect weird obsession girl, and meanwhile she's kind of like drawing, sculpting with clay and doing stuff with dresses and stuff. And it's
Yeah,
like
we
they're
don't
both
get to
kind of
hear
like
any of her side of the story until the second half of the movie. I actually like looked at this when I was watching it on my VLC player. It was like I looked at the timestamp when they started
yeah.
the story that included the person that becomes her.
Mm-hmm.
And that person doesn't even appear until like an hour into the movie, and it's exactly 2 hours long. So
Yeah. I was wondering the same thing because I felt like Antonio Banderas' story was coming to a head. I was like, okay, well, what are they going to do now? It's like, it feels like it's about to be over. And then they did like the weird flash forwarding thing.
yeah,
And then that's when it kind of fell apart for me because the symbolism is lost entirely upon its explanation, and it's I won't go too far into it. Stupid fucking twists. Anyway, that's I think those are the things that work primarily for me. Oh, the actress who plays Vera Cruz, Elena Anaya,
yeah.
Anya,
I know.
whatever.
Yeah.
Gorgeous man, very pretty. Yeah, I liked a lot of the cool doctor struggles. I wish they would have done a little bit more with that. I feel like
Yeah.
a lot of the ending was a really dumb explanatory cop out, but this will get into a little bit later, I guess.
Yeah.
Paul, what did you enjoy about La Pelle que Habitó?
I thought the like kind of like we've been talking, like the movie was pretty okay for the most part, but it was like the philosophical impact of like I don't know when the movie fell off for you. I want to say for me it was about like exactly when there was around a half an hour left in the movie when Antonio Banderas and Elena Anaya start making promises to each other.
Ha.
If you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
I think up until then, when we've seen some of the torture and stuff that Antonio Banderas has done to Elena Anaya's former self, that is really interesting because it, you know, I almost wish they would have gone into that more because the idea of like how do your thoughts keep you who you are when like everything physical connected to your identity is removed. Like this is literally like the only reason the ending had any impact for me at all is because the person who came into the shop at the end is only themselves in their mind. Like literally no other part of them is the same. They're just trapped in this new vessel, essentially, which that is like one of the most fucked up things I can think of. Also, I really liked all of the uncanny bodies that were strewn throughout the movie. So like, there's the body made of straw that Vicente keeps dressing with the dresses in the shop window. There's the bodies that are made of felt in Vera's room that she's working on in the early part of the movie and then later on in the movie. The felt suit that Vera wears gives her body this kind of uncanny, like almost ex machina kind of feel.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Yeah,
Ex Machina, indeed.
remind me very much of Ex Machina. A lot of the paintings that Antonio Banderas has around his house and that show up in the movie and other places have this very uncanny look about them. Like the humans have they're not unreal, but they're kind of like exaggerated proportions based on what, like, I understand, a lot of people I know to look like. I thought one of my favorite parts about this movie was the framing, like the framing of the shots. One of my favorite frames was the Vicente is chained to the desk eating the bowl of rice. And he's eating, and in between bites, he keeps saying, "No se vaya," like, don't go. But in the very background on, like, I think it's the left third of the frame, we see in completely soft focus a figure, like, climbing the stairs and then the door shutting behind him. And I thought that was really kind of stuff like, there's a lot of clever stuff like that. Like for example, this is a spoiler, but I think it's important to the story and to the review to say this. When Vera is getting raped by the tiger guy,
El Tigre.
at first we only see Marilia from the back of her head, and it's this back of her head where you can only see the glow of the screen in front of her. And then after it's cut back between that and the situation and Antonio Banderas' car pulling up and stuff, we see this close-up, straight-on shot of Marilia looking straight into the fucking camera, like, terrified. Like, stuff like that was really impactful. I thought the combination of the camera work and the editing brought this movie through the fog of its flaws, if that makes sense, because they were so intentful and they were so impactful. Other stuff that I liked, the music was gorgeous, especially that black jazz singer lady in the wedding. Like, her voice was amazing. And oh my gosh, all of the music and, like, the tense parts, like the little clickety clacking, all the percussive stuff was so fucking cool. I think also I have a soft spot for stories about revenge. I think one of the things we're going to be talking about for the longest time about this movie is where the movie fell off for us. So we're going to kind of get to that quickly because I think we can have a pretty interesting discussion about it. But just a really interesting movie. I don't know. I feel weird about this movie. I feel like I liked it, but I didn't like it. I don't know. It was a weird movie. I thought the performances were also pretty decent for the most part, despite having relatively, like, a lot of the dialogue was pretty on the nose.
Yeah,
and
totally.
So it could have easily had, like, that scene at the very end where Antonio Banderas is talking to his colleague and he pulls a gun out?
Yeah.
Like, every line in that scene is like melodrama, right?
Totally.
So every line in the movie is that on the nose, but the acting is more subtle in other parts of the movie, so it doesn't, like, hit you over the head with the lines, I think. That's my opinion. So I will give the acting credit because of that as well. So music, cinematography, acting, editing, all aces in my book. Philosophy, very interesting. Now on to what didn't work for us. Go for it.
Without trying to sound like a blatant racist or anything, this movie, at a point I realized I was like, oh, this is like a Mexican soap opera. I'm
This
not
is
trying
like
to
a
draw
what?
a Mexican soap opera.
Oh, yeah.
Like, yeah, like, I'm not trying to be racist in that, they're both Spanish things.
No, I don't think you. I don't think you are.
Yeah, maybe it's a storytelling device that I'm unaware of, but there were so many odd twists of like, El Tigre, you came, my mother. Oh, who is that pretty woman? I recognize you. Oh, please don't. How come you don't remember my dick? And then getting shot like, oh, they were secretly my sons, the illegitimate son of the doctor, or the brother of the doctor. And she does not know, but I am her mother.
I
And
think
it's like,
the Tigre and Antonio Banderas being the ladies' kids, that is like a soap opera trick for sure.
Oh, hell
but
yeah.
I think you're missing the narrative device that is the Tigre thing saying you don't remember my dick.
No, I got it. It was like a Hitchcockian thing.
That's like the ultimate like key turning in the lock to show that like he definitely made this lady in the image of his late wife. Because they never specifically say that. They say they say vague shit like she looks too much like her and you're torturing yourself, stuff like that. But like they never on the
says it.
They never on the nose say like this person is very definitely his ex-wife Gal who died in a crash. But Tigre doesn't know that Gal is actually dead. Tigre
said, I left you burning in the car,
No, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Tigre doesn't know that that Antonio Banderas' wife is actually dead.
Yeah.
So I think that part is less crazy to me, but like them being brothers and shit, that didn't make sense.
That was ridiculous.
There was a lot of stuff like that near the end too.
Oh my god, it was nonstop at the end.
Yeah.
If you have like a tennis ball lobber or like a pitching machine at like a batting cage, it's first going dunk, dunk, dunk with like dumb shit or dumb twists, and the very end is going like a Monty Python sketch or something. It's just like going crazy or like a just like throwing way too many balls at the batter who can't get out of the way and is just getting pummeled by hard balls. That's what it felt like.
Yeah, I totally feel you. I feel like they're like the story could have used punch ups,
but you promised. I lied.
Yeah, like stuff like that is just like, come on, man. Also, like they could have built up in the way that Ex Machina did. I hate to draw this comparison again, but they could have built up Vera gaining Antonio Banderas' trust more.
It seemed like she was actually in love with him at a certain point because like she had to like there were traces of like her trying to snap herself out of the role she was currently in when it was revealed conveniently that she's actually this like torture victim of actually a guy now trapped in a woman's body.
Yeah, so I think now is the time we can say lesbians. Wait, let's stop for a sec and let's backtrack. Let's spoiler alert.
Yeah, I'll cut that out. I'll cut that part out.
No. I think we should spoil this because I don't think a lot of people are going to see this movie.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. It turns out about midway through the movie that Vera is this dude who raped Antonio Banderas' daughter, thus causing her, after a long period of time, to commit suicide after she's committed to a mental institution.
But even the rape is not like really rape because she was like into it until she heard the song that she was singing when her mother killed herself.
That's what I don't think. I don't think that though. I think that she was confused about what he was saying because
or what he was doing.
Yeah, because he was on drugs and she had never socialized with men before, as they reveal later. So she didn't know what he was doing, and she was talking about how constrictive her clothes were, an issue that came up again and again in this story with this character, as little as she is in the story. And he's taking that as signs that, oh, she knows the rest of us are going out to make out or get blown or whatever. She's into this. And she, I don't think, understands that she's doing that. What's that?
They're legitimately having a fucking orgy.
Yeah, I don't think she understood what everyone was going out to do. I think that's why she felt so traumatized at his, having gone through with this. I feel very connected to her perspective in this situation.
Was it only coincidental then that the black lady started to sing the song that she was singing when her mother killed herself, or was that supposed to be symbolic?
I think it could have been coincidental, but also like, what if that's just a famous Spanish song that everyone loves?
I don't
And she
know.
happened to be singing it when her mom killed herself, and then she spends all of these years in a, getting therapy and shit like that, and then that trigger device happens to her again. It's like people with PTSD, some dudes will come back from like Iraq or Afghanistan or something, some weird, something will happen and they'll end up beating up their best friend or some shit.
Boy, I remember when the Nam soldiers were our go-to PTSD victims.
I mean,
Well,
it's a thing.
no,
It's a
I know
thing
you.
people.
I 100% agree, and I know that's what they were going for. I just thought there were just so many moments where you had to suspend your disbelief and just to like completely look the other way when gaping plot holes happened, or
Tell
explain
me
it
about
away
them.
by coincidence and convenience.
Well,
That
I don't
the
think
rape
coincidence
scene.
is like a big. I think the combination of her mental instability because of her mother's suicide, the guy being on drugs because that's how he likes to party, and the coincidence of the song happening. I don't think the misunderstanding that results from those three things that, I think you could pretty legitimately call rape as Antonio Banderas does. I don't think that's too far fetched. I don't know.
None of it feels set up properly. Where
Oh, I agree. I don't think it feels it doesn't feel fluid,
not at
but
all.
I don't think it's far fetched at all.
What the movie does in so many of the scenes is 1 plus 1 equals 3. Haha! See that math? Like
Yeah. Oh yeah.
that's all it's trying to do is shock you without any setup, but saying like, but what if we had a brother who didn't know it was his brother who was secretly having an affair with his wife?
Well, see, I think those little things connect the Vera's rape well enough, but I don't think I think we could have cut out the they were brothers thing. I mean, even without them being brothers, the Tigre guy could have run away with Antonio Banderas's ex-wife, right?
Well,
Like
right, but
they didn't need that. So that part could have been cut out. The rest of it, I think you need that little bit of connection for the weird kind of uncanny reveal that Vera is a man and oh, this is her first time. This is her first time having sex with a man and it sucks. And also it's against his will. It like takes everything about his identity that he knew to be himself and like kind of just rips it to pieces, I guess. I don't know.
I forgot what I was gonna say. But let's continue down the list of why else this bothers me so much,
Okay.
because a lot
Yeah,
of
so
things come
I
together.
have kind of been over explaining shit and like
Oh no, no,
making
no, that's
excuses
fine.
for the movie.
No, that's perfectly fine. I do that all the time. The movie is so expository, it hurts. The gothic literature stuff in the beginning really had nothing to do with the ending at all. Him being like a scientist, a doctor experimenting on humans had nothing to do with the ending about like I am Vincente with his moms. The fact that they needed to like bring in his crew to help him do the vaginoplasty, only to have them have that weird moment for him to bring in the newspaper clipping that would shock Vincente into seeing it and make him freak out and want to murder the doctor after that. Like the fuck, man. But the whole thing about him doing his conference and talking to the doctors, like, this is what transgenesis is. I used pig's skin to make it flame retardant. And it's like, okay, he's clearly doing a thing because his wife was burned to death, which never
Yeah.
comes up again. It's not even useful at all to the ending. Why did we set up the fact that her Vincente's new skin is fireproof? A useless, totally useless. There's so much useless information in this movie. The doctor's telling him you can't experiment anymore and just says, okay. and then that's it. You know, a total bait and switch, or at least
You're
mushing too
mentioning
many
stuff that
stories
has
together.
like clear explanations though, or that like doesn't need to be like an issue.
That barely has anything to do with anything else in the movie. It's just like one and done bullshit.
The wife thing is not one and done. The wife thing is like throughout the entire movie, like constantly. It's like an undertone of the entire movie. And the medical thing, that's just something that happens in medicine. You're like I feel like you're picking apart this movie. You don't have concrete stuff to like the thing about they don't need to be brothers. That's one thing I will give you. But right now I'm not seeing everything that you're seeing in terms of what didn't work for you.
I was excited at the setup of seeing a Frankenstein and his monster thing develop, or a doctor so obsessed with here not necessarily conquering death, but conquering the accident from happening again, right? The circumstances of which we're not entirely sure who this other woman is, but we
Yeah,
assume he's in love with by the way he looks at her and fawns over it,
sure.
only to really have nothing happen of that plot line of the scientists trying to conquer natural forces, you know, other than
Sure.
like the weird torture thing that he does. The torture felt underbaked as well. Vincente's whole reason for your symbolic, like the thing that you love so much, the identity crisis thing, I guess.
Yeah.
For me feels really pointless. It's just it's more of a afterthought. Oh, and by the way, kind of thing, because they don't develop it fully enough.
Wait,
The
what specifically don't they develop?
They put
I'm
him in
lost
they
here.
put him in torture dungeon. He feeds him some rice, makes him into a girl as like a revenge thing, and then all of a sudden he like has this weird drive to make him into his wife. It's a pretty big leap that doesn't come about naturally at all. There's not like a mental instability in the doctor aside from his drive for like fucking total revenge, you know? It's not like you ever see him so lonely and missing his wife at all, other than him just trying to get even with the guy who he blames for the suicide of his daughter, right? Raping her.
Yeah, I would say that
Huge leap.
I would say that I don't know that you're wrong in terms of suggesting it's a huge leap from the scientific what's the word I'm looking for?
He's like a genius with questionable
The
morals.
scientific altruism with like, questionable morality to like the torture thing, because I honestly think you probably might be onto something there, but like I kind of see this as two different movies in one, and one of them just has a bad half of it.
That might be my problem with it.
Like the first, like I think you're very right. Like the first half of the movie is a very gothic horror. This is a weird guy with questionable ethics but interesting ideas type of thing. But then I think when he and Vera fall asleep with each other, they both, I think maybe this is something we didn't touch on. The way that the events of that wedding come up is that they both have a dream about it. So
Oh man, that made me
Antonio
even more upset.
Banderas dreams about his part in it and discovering his daughter. The dude who is now Vera dreams about his going to the party and running away. And then once that happens, it's not Antonio Banderas' story anymore. It's the dude's story. So then it's this movie about this dude, and they kind of, he's just a normal dude, but he wants out, so there's a reason for him to go missing or whatever. Midway through that is when it kind of jumps the shark a little bit for me. But I think what we're getting at is this could have been two different movies with distinct tones and themes and stuff like that, but instead the tonal shift around the time that it becomes Vicente's movie is kind of what kicks it into weird gear. Is that fair to say?
I agree.
Because I think if we're being honest, that's what we're getting at ultimately. Is it like
Well,
Vicente's story is a weird one, but because they put so much weird stuff in the middle of it, it just doesn't necessarily follow to the end.
my biggest problem is they set up a lot, but there's no payoff for any of it. In the beginning, the Tigre thing barely mattered. Or being mom of both of them was completely pointless. In the middle, when you see her like ripping up her dresses and trying to vacuum them up, it's like, okay, I guess she's trying to cause a fire or a clog, so they have to open it up, and she's doing something right because she tore them to ribbons and just starts like you think that's like part of some elaborate escape plan.
I thought it was going to be her. I thought it was going to be her trying to hang herself.
Something, yeah. They set that up. They go through the fucking laborious trouble of having like a 2-minute moment of her in her room tearing up all of her clothes with her teeth in her hands and vacuuming it up. To not pay off at all. All of a sudden, she has her dress at the end. Don't you remember the dress I said back in the 20 years ago when I first left home on that day on the bike?
Like, 7 years ago, by the way.
Whatever it is. And it's like, this is the dress I wore. Remember? It's like, wait, what? Where'd you get that dress? Like, huh? What? I guess you got that when you went out shopping earlier that day? Like, huh? That made me laugh out loud. I was so frustrated by that point. Let's talk about the doctor's dungeon for a second.
Okay.
There's a lot of potential here. Like, is he a crazy psychopath that, he's one of those classic doctors who, has a fucking torture chamber. You know the type. Well, like,
yeah.
That was totally undeveloped and underbaked. That was never ever used again.
I wish they would have done more with that. I feel like that could have been a very Cask of Amontillado thing.
Would have loved it. Yeah, I was excited to kind of like see how revenge was going to play out.
Yeah.
I just felt like a really poor attempt at Hitchcock, if trying to sound snooty. The horrible ending of, I can't believe you're letting her out and to go roam free and to go shopping. It's okay. She promised. Like, oh my god.
I think that speaks to the
really
a theme
poor
that comes up in this movie a lot, which is like that.
Oh man.
The concept. What are you? I haven't even said my thing. You're already groaning about it.
I know, but I just want to hear what you have to say. I'm just.
Well, this is like a theme throughout the movie of like people in love are fucking retards.
Oh.
And Antonio Banderas has obviously had that one scene where they're about to smoke opium where he's like they're both resisting the urge to kiss each other. And, he's obviously fallen for her as a, placeholder for his late wife. And people who love each other are fucking idiots. And that's a theme that comes up in this movie a few times.
I liken that to like
even the maid says it. The maid says it out loud.
What?
She says you're acting like a child.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think that's a legit theme.
No, I remember her saying that, and also being equally as vexed by the pointlessness and just stupidity of everything that was happening at that moment. Because this movie follows a lot of real world logic until that moment where it just completely says, we promised. And for my problems earlier when I mentioned the doctor jumping the shark into just straight up falling in love with Vincente is just night and day. There's no progression into him falling in love with her image or even setting up an obsession with her image at all. Other than the fact that she was a burn victim and he loved her so much that he would always like sleep by her side and like, that was sweet. That was nice. It's nice enough. He actually deeply loved his wife and was traumatized by her death. Fine. But there's no obsession with the form or even her ghost.
Yeah,
It was
that really
revenge.
was underdeveloped as well. You're right.
It was pure revenge, and then that sprouted out of nowhere. It literally just happened, and then to say, "Wait, and now you're doing this stupid ass shit because you promised." Again, like I said, I laughed out loud at that moment because of just how exponentially dumber and dumber and dumber was getting, and I just, and of course, it ended exactly how you would have assumed it was going to end after you understood that he's some weird surgery patient who, by all means, was acting like he was in love with the doctor until he saw his own picture, not like Ex Machina, where she's secretly brooding for escape in a little bit like self-survival-y aspect. By the way, Ex Machina is a movie we reviewed on this podcast a long time ago that we didn't actually air, which is about a robot lady invented by a
we didn't air that.
genius. Yeah, because we kind of we're at a loss for words. We didn't really know quite what we wanted to say about it. And now having a compare contrast with this movie, that movie does the whole secret micro emotional acting and all that other stuff for survival and what it takes, like, are you going to kill somebody kind of thing to get your freedom, way better than this does, because this, for all intents and purposes, looked and acted like a romance, weird obsessions, science horror thing until it was about, you're a weird jigsaw captor guy and I gotta get out, or like a Silence of the Lambs, please sir, put the lotion on his skin thing.
Yeah.
It was a fucking mess. Where there are all the points that you defend, I agree with principally, because I think they should work theoretically, but when you put them all together like this, and for how little they actually do about developing the points that they just say happen, just take this at face value. It's almost like a meta joke on itself. Like the promise was, just take this at face value. And then the movie says, but this is stupid. And then the movie says again to itself, well, it said so. Like, oh my god. It almost acknowledging the stupidity of everything. That's me being a little bit too sarcastically philosophical, if you will. But
yeah, I think I know where you're coming from. I just think
it's very bothersome.
Yeah, I feel like maybe I feel like I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. It set the bar rather high in the beginning, and then to watch it just spin out of control and really crash. At a certain point, I think there was about 20 or 30 minutes left in the movie when I was just not enjoying it so much, and just so much disbelief and like disappointment I was feeling, that I saw myself watching this movie and then started laughing, thinking, God, if I would have known what this was going to happen in the beginning, I should have been laughing the whole time and been loving this movie so much more as a joke, just knowing where it was going to take me. And then once I reconciled that fact and finishing out the movie, I was laughing a lot at the movie, like enjoying its complete ridiculousness.
Yeah.
Like the at the cinema Oscars, kind of like the weird ridiculousness that kind of like the Oscar awards always kind of spin out of control for Tim Heidecker and Greg Turkington, but still being kind of grounded in reality. You just kind of like laugh at the uncomfortability and like really over the top random shit that might happen.
Yeah.
I ended the movie with a laugh and then a ha ha, like with the fucking really awkward, stupid scene of Vincente going back to his mom's or finding his mom's.
Yeah, I almost feel like they could have ended it. Like they could have cut out the scene with
just looking at the back, and they say, "Can I help you?" and then just end it, and just leave the rest.
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna even say they could have ended it after she
gets out
people. Yeah, but I mean,
yeah, that could have been good too.
Honestly, the last like 20 minutes of this movie, I felt were like so off kilter. I don't know what they could have done to fix it.
It was funny. Well, they just didn't need it. They didn't need half of it. Or they needed to reshoot half of it.
It should have been spent. They should have spent those 20 minutes punching up other parts of the movie that needed more context or punching up or information, stuff like that.
The catharsis is not in her reuniting with her moms. The catharsis is the escape or the revenge.
Yeah, I feel like also, if anything, and this is a testament to how, I think movies can affect you. At the end of the movie, when Vera is in Vicente's mom's shop, every time the camera shows her face, I'm like, oh, fuck. Like, that's when I really had the feelings of like this philosophical love for the concept of being in a vessel that you don't recognize.
Yeah.
Is because I don't really think they needed to have that end conversation just like you didn't. But every time they showed this close up of her eyes like welling up with tears, I was like, this is like the only thing that's the same in this person that they used to have is their brain. And other than that, they're fucked. They can never be the same as they were. They can never have any of this, like nothing in their life can ever be the same again. And they have to continue living. Like that is the most fucked up fucking thing I can think of. But at the same time, everything that led to that moment was obnoxious.
That's its own separate idea. That's its own separate movie. That's its own separate moral and exploration. Everything about that is different. I love the fact that you were able to draw so strongly that emotion and idea and spark that kind of reflection and meditation on that idea because of that.
Yeah, that fucked me up, dude.
I like
really
that.
Fucked me up.
That's how you took that part. I hate it because it was, pointless to the movie or it should have been its own thing. But I'm at least very happy that you were able to draw a very interesting philosophical point on that otherwise might not have been explored if they did cut half the other shit out. But if that was the case, could it have warranted its own movie? Sure. Did it hurt this movie for being in it? Yes. Am I glad Paul, thought about that during this movie, though, as a result of it being in there? Yeah. But I don't think it services the movie in any way, but I'm glad that you had that experience with it.
Yeah, I agree that it doesn't service the movie, but that was like the one point that I really thought about that constantly. Like, obviously there's a scene that's meant to illustrate that where Vera's writing on the wall and like watching the yoga tape and stuff like that, which by the way, that was horrible keyframing on the television. But like, it just, fucking that one part, if that wasn't there, it would be so much better of a movie, but I wouldn't have had that crazy, like, oh shit type of realization.
We're talking about the yoga?
No, the end scene.
Yeah.
The yoga was fine. It was just the keyframing on the television was so bad that it took me out of the movie for a sec.
Oh, I see. The El Tigre part took me out of the movie.
Yeah, I don't think they needed. One of the things. I mean, we haven't even gotten to what I disliked about this movie yet, but we've been kind of bringing it up over.
We've been doing a little bit of intellectual sparring.
I'll just say that like one of the things that I don't like in general, and it's probably because I'm made uncomfortable by it, which is sometimes you have to just confront the things you're uncomfortable with. I don't like how heavily this movie relies upon the theme of, or like the idea of rape as like
the catalyst
for stuff happening. Yeah, I really like hate how pervasive the culture of like non-consent is in the United States, especially, and stuff like that. When it's actually like violent rape in a movie, it really just fucking, I hate it. I can't.
It was done like high drama rape though in this movie.
Yeah. Just like, I don't know. That's another thing where like once I saw the end and I thought about all that shit about being trapped in this vessel and stuff, and then I went back and thought about the rest of the movie, I was like, I don't want that scene to be in there. I don't think it's necessary for the story that I liked about this story. But when you think about the being trapped in a vessel that, that thing, that's like one of the most fucked up parts of the movie. But I also, like I said, it doesn't need to be in there.
That's one of the things I find the most problematic with The Streetcar Named Desire. I remember, I think I saw the play. I remember seeing the play, and then it's like, oh my god, her life is falling out of control. Oh my god, this guy's a total asshole and a tyrant. And then he rapes her after like she's at her last point. I'm like, oh come on, like
Yeah, it's like I already got that.
yeah,
I already
she's
know.
already destroyed and completely like
Yeah.
dehumanized, and then he rapes her. I'm like, it didn't need that for the story, and I was so upset. And I, not knowing that this is like an old and established story, really, I was like, I don't care if it's old and established. I think it's already gotten to the point where she's broken and disheartened and like kind of gonna go crazy, and then
Yeah.
she rapes her. We just got to make this
Yeah,
as bad
that's
as
how this
fucking
movie
possible
felt in
and
that
rape
part.
her.
Yeah. If they would have
And I was
just
like,
edited
okay.
it differently and that would have been later in the story, it's like, oh, guess what? We don't need that all of a sudden.
Yeah. So I was just trying to say that I agree with your points about rape being the catalyst for a lot of things, especially
Yeah, I
in
kind of
the
hate
way
that
of
device.
villainizing, or just to like really lay it on them. And then it got so bad they were raped, and it's like I got
Yeah,
it.
it's like you might as well at that point tie her to a train track
Yeah,
and be wearing a silly, like, thin, curly mustache.
it was already terrible, like that he got a vaginoplasty against his will.
Yeah,
that
like
was
that's
awful.
already fucked up enough.
Yeah, and then he rapes her, and it's like, oh, okay,
It's like, okay, come on.
yeah, okay.
Stop.
Yeah, exactly. But in this case, it was, and then he rapes her. But before that, and it was like, oh, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, just kind of really laying it on there. But
Yeah.
this is, in this movie, the depictions of rape were not like as horrifying as I could imagine. I think I've seen other movies that have like just made it like just completely despicable. Remember in Watchmen when she's getting raped in the Watchmen?
Oh God, yeah, that is really.
It's so
fucking
uncomfortable. It's like, oh
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
this doesn't feel good at
Yeah.
all to watch. And then
Another
when this one
movie that
happens,
makes me really uncomfortable in the rape scene is well, there's several of the scenes, but in specific, the singing in the rain scene of A Clockwork Orange.
oh, that's awful. Yeah, how did I
Dude,
forget
that
about that?
like hurts my heart to watch.
No, that made me feel like so gross, and that made
Yeah, it
me
makes
feel
you
really
feel sick.
uncomfortable after like days after. I just
Dude, I
didn't-
know that movie is really effective at making you feel just like
That's
sick to your
psychological
stomach.
torture. That fucking
Yeah,
movie.
dude.
That scene too.
Oh my God.
How fucking awful. I was kind of rooting for the guy who was getting revenge on him for raping his wife, in Clockwork Orange. Because when he like goes back into the house,
Well,
and,
that's
like,
why
he's
that
like,
movie's so interesting and compelling is the fact that like this person who did this awful thing,
he's not
like-
him anymore. This guy is
yeah,
dead.
they changed who he was. Like they changed his basic, autonomous nerve responses to like stimuli.
Yeah,
So he's not like the same person,
yeah. I love that movie for that interesting
the duality.
introspection. Yeah,
Oh
but
man, yeah. Like,
you
do you give
deprive-
someone free will no matter the cost? No matter if they'll use it for evil at every turn,
and in changing the bad guy like that, you've
Created a
taken
false
justice away. Yeah, you've created a false good and taken justice away from the guy who has all right to exact revenge upon the misdeeds that were brought upon him from the person who was been roboticized or changed in such a way.
Yep.
It's a really cool. But anyway, in this movie, the rape was like you're just kind of like watching the rape happen. Like, all right, they're talking, they're like talking and lovemaking. It's not like traumatic. It's not scary. There's no screaming. It's just kind of like they're doing. It's like this kind of hurts, and it's like
Yeah,
okay.
I just didn't like.
All right.
I didn't like that scene. I didn't think it needed to be in there.
And when they did the Antonio Banderas scene of like, here are the dialers you're gonna need to make your vagina work.
That was
You're gonna go from
all they
smallest to
needed.
biggest. Yeah,
That was
I know.
all they needed in that.
All they needed to do
arena.
is slow that down
Yeah.
and really punctuate the uncomfortability of that scene to have a rape moment.
Oh
'Cause
yeah, you didn't
that's
need
way
the tiger
worse.
guy at all after that.
Oh yeah, totally.
Good point. That's a good point.
That's the most demeaning, humiliating, completely objectifying at that point, ruining everything moment that you could possibly have.
Yeah.
You've not only raped him as a woman, even though he's a man, and all this other shit. You brought it home like, now do this. like your life depended on it, as though your mouth was meant to breathe, or this is the way your mouth is going to breathe. Like, oh
Yeah.
god, how
Yeah, like
disgusting and
that's
vile.
really fucked up and brutal.
But they didn't stop. They didn't hold on that. They just said, okay. And it's like,
Yeah.
you use your dildo today? Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
they just kind of walked away from it. They said, that's the way how it went. You use your dildo today? Yeah. Okay. And then they never mentioned it again.
All right, good talk.
Yeah. It's like, are you fucking kidding me?
Like half the scenes in this movie could have been ended with like, okay, good talk, like in a sarcastic tone of voice.
They did. Or they just like, everyone would get into the huddle. Go Lions or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Fuck, dude.
Fucking comical.
This movie had so much potential, and the wasted time at the end just really fucked it all up.
It made me laugh.
Yeah.
I love the fact that we're able to garner such a intellectually stimulating conversation as a result of this movie, which is so odd because usually if you hate a movie, you just hate it. But I guess there is enough, especially for you.
There's enough that's stimulating or,
right.
Redemptive about this movie that it can be discussed seriously, I think. That's probably one of its best facets.
I still write this movie off in my mind, and I probably will in memory. Like, I'm not going to think back about that really profound feeling I had when watching this movie.
Yeah.
But I might...
If anything, I would use this as inspiration to create something that's more coherent that says or does similar things.
Yeah. I bet if Hitchcock had this movie, he could have done some interesting stuff, but...
Yeah, well, apparently the book is way more fucked up and way more interesting than the movie, because the movie, like I mentioned and like we agreed, it sort of focuses on the victim, but in a weird soap opera way in the second half.
Totally soap opera.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, after we said the thing about melodrama, I went to the Wikipedia page and looked down at like the like critical reception or whatever.
Yeah.
And a lot of the critical reception about this movie is like, it's like a melodrama and it's like a soap opera, but it's pretty coherent despite that. So it's like, oh.
Uh-oh.
Like that's pretty much
coherent despite that.
Yeah.
That's funny. It's too bad. I think a lot was squandered on this.
Well, there's a reason this movie didn't win Best Foreign Language Film its year, and that this guy's other movie did win Foreign Language Film.
What was that? Shape of Water?
Voltaire. Voltaire is this movie, I think, like 2 years before this. Did super well. I think it had Penelope Cruz in it.
I see it's the first recommended one.
Yeah.
It's amazing to see how old these movies are. They feel very timeless.
This movie also, I think we should probably wrap this up because I think we're droning at this point. But
we didn't even get what you didn't like.
Oh, I mean, I think I said enough of it. Just the rape scene didn't need to happen. A lot of the extra characters and plot and exposition didn't need to happen. I agree with you on those, but I just wanted to defend some of the things you specifically mentioned because they seemed frivolous at the time when I heard them. Last thing though, this movie reminds me a lot of the movie Funny Games. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
No.
It's Funny Games I think it's like an hour and a half or 2 hours. It's about a little under 2 hours. Funny Games is an hour and a half to 2 hours of just discomfort. And I think now if I watch this movie knowing the ending, I would probably turn it off, 3/4 of the way through and be like, oh, that's a pretty interesting movie. And
3/4?
Live with the discomfort of the movie. But it reminds me a lot of Funny Games because it's just so uncomfortable so much of the time.
Wow.
With that said, would you recommend this movie to fellow movie viewers?
That is a big NO. I say avoid at all costs. I find this to be a pretty big waste of time, although I do enjoy it now, looking at it sarcastically. But, sure. I mean, like, for this philosophical merits, fine. But this is seriously not worth going out of the way for to get that message from this movie. If anything, it hurts the message if you're trying to derive that like I'm gonna go into this movie and feel this thing about rape when I see this, or I'm gonna go in there and feel
or
this thing
any
about
of the
gender identity.
philosophical shit. Yeah.
Yeah, it just hurts its own message by being so bad at what it does.
I think
I hate this.
Yeah, fair enough.
But what do you think, Paul?
No, I wouldn't. I would also not recommend it, but I think
Okay.
it has enough redeeming qualities to make it interesting. I think this director is an interesting study in Spanish film and stuff like that. So it is worth maybe investigating if you're really into film and film history and stuff like that. And if you are able to derive, philosophical concepts out of scenes that kind of drag the meaning out of them. Like, I think a lot of times in this movie, the philosophy of a scene is completely drug out by how off-kilter the scene goes. But if you can kind of stay centered in that one thing, you can find some pretty interesting shit in here, but it's not really.
Wow. So you still kind of do in a way recommend it for its philosophical
I think it has enough redeeming qualities that if you're really like one of those people that likes to overthink shit, and I'm not talking myself up here, I'm not saying that's a good thing or that I'm a smart or anything, but if you like to overthink shit based on like what you're presented with, this might be an interesting movie, but for the most part, I would not recommend this movie.
What made you think about this movie, if I may ask?
When it came out, the trailer and the poster freaked me the fuck out, and I knew that it wasn't an American movie, and I was like, this movie looks fucking crazy. I knew it was about a deranged surgeon, and I don't know what reminded me about it, but I was like, something brought it up. I was either watching like an old Javier Bardem movie, like that one where he's paralyzed and he wants to kill himself, and I was like, oh, we should watch like a Spanish movie, and so I just I like looked up Antonio Banderas to find out the name of this, and then remembered it.
Cool.
Yeah.
I was wondering what inspired this movie. I didn't know at the time until I watched it.
I think I'm going to
like,
try and find a good Korean director or Japanese director to do next. Because I really like going out of the United States for fun or interesting shit.
This movie reminded me a lot of Audition, or at least in its torture dungeon scenes.
Fucking movie, dude.
Yeah, I was like, Audition did that way
movie,
better.
Yeah. God damn it.
That's like a nightmare movie. It's not like
Audition is like Old Boy without any sort of scruples about what the audience is allowed to see.
I never saw Old Boy.
What? Okay, we're doing that next time.
I've always kind of avoided it, knowing how deranged it is, and like I don't seek gore. I don't go out of my way to find
It's not a gory movie at all. Old Boy is not gory at all.
Oh, I thought it was like just this whole. I thought it was like a Saw torture porn.
Nope, it's just fucked up. We'll watch it one of the next few episodes, and you'll see how fucked up it is. But at any rate, I have been Paul Morgan.
I've been Anson Chan. And thank you for listening.
We'll see you next time.
Yeah, later, guys.
Later.